I'm Linda Matchett and I write historic fiction. Today, I'm going to be reading to you from my World War II romance, Spies and Sweethearts. But before I do that, I thought I'd give you a little bit of background information. When I was growing up, my parents taught me that when there were jobs to do, everyone pitched in, regardless of gender. In our household, there were no boy chores or girl chores. Instead, my brothers learned to cook, clean, and do laundry, and my sister and I learned to weed, mow, and shovel snow. In addition, my folks instilled in us the realization that we could do or be anything, a concept not historically accepted for women. But war has a way of changing things, and World War II was no exception. Because of the shortage of men on the home front, women of all ages volunteered or held paid positions that were never before available to them, both at home and abroad. And by doing so, they paved the way for future generations, myself included. As a former human resources professional, I'm fascinated by the roles women played during the war. So when I was considering what to write about for my next book, I decided to explore some of the atypical jobs held by women. I came up with auto mechanic, war correspondent, and spy. Thus, my Sisters in Service series was born. First up, Spies and Sweethearts, I decided to set that in occupied Paris, having already researched that area for my novella Love's Rescue. I knew it was the perfect place to set book one. There was a large resistance network there, and many Allied spies parachuted behind the lines in efforts to free the country. The Germans had defeated the French army in May of 1940, and on June 10th, the French government fled. 4 days later, the Nazis had taken over Paris and put in a puppet government. The occupation was a series of frustrations, shortages, and humiliations. The French were required to cover the expenses associated with the upkeep of the 300,000-strong army of occupation. Curfew was in effect from 9 in the evening until 5 in the morning, and at night the city went dark. Rationing began in September of 1940, and every year that passed, the supplies grew more scarce and the prices grew higher. The Third Reich flag flew over all the government buildings, and the French press only contained German propaganda. Jews were forced to wear the Yellow Star of David, and clocks were set to German time. Many young Frenchmen were forced to work in factories for the German war industry, and wearing a beret became forbidden, a seemingly small act, but a definite stab at French history and French culture. Once I decided on where to set my book, I knew I had to research about the espionage side of the war. After all, how were spies recruited? How were they trained? What did they learn? And what was it actually like to be a spy behind the lines? Needless to say, recruiting was a challenge. After all, candidates couldn't be told what they'd be doing, only that the job would be interesting and rewarding. And did we mention dangerous? I was able to get my hands on a copy of the training manual for Britain's Special Operations Executive Organization, the organization that America based its own Office of Strategic Services. In addition, I read memoirs by female agents, as well as many of their biographies. The best part, however, was listening to oral history interviews of these women, hearing their hair-raising stories in their own voice. The women who served as spies had mixed emotions about what they did. One young woman, Amy Thorpe Pack, said, "I hope and believe I was a patriot. There was no rule of thumb for patriotism. My superiors told me that the results of my work saved perhaps thousands of American and British lives, but even one would have made my work worthwhile." Mine was total commitment. Wars are not won by respectable methods. One tries to win any war any way one can. I hope my Sisters in Service series honors these men and women who served during World War II, and especially those who gave the ultimate sacrifice of their lives. So now for the first chapter of Spies and Sweethearts. Just because she was the eldest, did Cora have to criticize Emily's every decision? She was a high school French teacher, not a schoolgirl. Shaking her head, Emily climbed on the bike and pedaled away from the house. She'd exhausted her gas rations for the week, so using the car was out. Fortunately, the library wasn't far. She could finish preparing the end-of-year exams there. Two of her students were already gone. Days after they turned 18, the boys talked to the principal into letting them graduate early in order to enlist. Her heart constricted. Now, both were in training with the Army Air Force and would soon be on their way overseas to fight the Germans. They spoke French impeccably, a skill better used in the ambassador ranks rather than on an airplane. The war stroked Emily's cheeks as she rode. Squinting against the sun's glare, she huffed out a breath. At least the boys were doing something for the war effort. Her service with the American Women's Voluntary Services as a plane spotter and messenger wasn't exactly going to turn the tide against the Axis powers. Surely there was something more that she could do. She braked in front of the sandstone building and wheeled her bike into an empty spot in one of the racks near the entrance of Trafalgar Public Library. A Carnegie library, it housed several hundred books thanks to the Scottish-American philanthropist. What would he think of the war? Emily! A broad grin on her face, Joan Boyer hurried toward Emily. Her floral dress danced around her legs, and her ponytail flounced. Your mom said I'd find you here. Her smile faltered. Are you okay? You look terrible. Gee, thanks. Glad I could count on you for support. What? Emily finger-combed her hair. I'm sorry. I had another argument with Cora. Just because she's already been married and widowed, she thinks she knows what's good for everyone. Joan linked her arm through Emily's. Let's grab a seat in the memorial garden. You can tell me everything. They sauntered to the wooden bench, sheltered by a large weeping cherry tree and surrounded by black-eyed Susans and a rainbow of coneflowers and petunias nodding in the breeze. All right, what gives? You've been annoyed with Cora in the past, but you seem especially angry today. I am. Emily slumped against the seat. True or not, it feels like neither she nor Doris take me seriously because I'm the youngest. That all I'm good for is teaching a bunch of kids. A few days ago, Cora commented that plane spotting night duty might be interfering with my job, and she didn't understand why I was still volunteering. Like I can't juggle multiple responsibilities. I'm almost 26 years old. I am quite capable. Maybe she worries about you. Perhaps, but it doesn't seem like concern. It feels like criticism of my life. Emily fisted her hands. This morning I got a letter telling me I've been accepted into a new government program. I leave for training the day after school's out. She overheard me telling Mom about the job and quizzed me about it. When I told her I couldn't share specifics, she rolled her eyes and asked what the government needed with a school teacher. Well, that's awful. Joan squeezed Emily's shoulder. The worst of it is that once she got started down that road, Mom followed, said I should rethink the opportunity, that I have a perfectly good job here at home and my volunteer work is sufficient. She frowned. Then Mom said I'm being selfish to go off on my own. It's bad enough I'm still living at home at my age, but for them to try to dictate my decisions is just too much. What are you going to do? Send a telegram accepting the position. I've got to live my own life no matter what they say. She blinked away tears forming in her eyes. Do you think I'm being self-centered by going? Absolutely not. Your parents are in perfect health, and Cora is living here too. She can take care of any needs they might have. Joan leaned forward. You really can't say much about the job? Not even a little? The tightness in Emily's chest eased, and she chuckled. You always could make me feel better. I'm sorry for not telling you I applied, but frankly, I was skeptical I'd get selected. You should have seen the crowd. Anyway, I don't know a lot about the job. There's some new governmental department, and it needs people who are bilingual. The exam contained lots of translation exercises, especially with regard to colloquialisms and dialects for different regions in France and French-speaking countries. Now you know how your students feel. Absolutely, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go easy on them for the final. Emily rubbed her damp palms on her skirt. I can't believe this is going to be my last year of teaching for a while. Maybe forever. I'm a bit nervous about notifying the principal about leaving. The factories pay much higher than the schools, so Medford has had a lot of resignations. The school may have to combine classes next year. Listen, this war won't last forever. In fact, some people say it might be over by Christmas. Surely you'll be back. Emily shook her head. I don't want to be a naysayer, but I doubt the war is going to be over by the end of the year. I think we're in for this for the long haul. Can you at least tell me where you're going? I could come to visit. I don't know, I've forgotten the address, somewhere in Washington, D.C., but that's not my final stop. I'll be transported with other new employees to the training facility where I'll stay for 3 months. I'm not going to be able to send or receive letters while I'm there, and definitely no visitors. Joan bolted upright. Ooh, that sounds intriguing. Very secretive. If you're lucky, there will be a few dreamboats in the class. Pfft, romance is the last thing I need, Joan. Besides, guys our age are in the defense industry or armed forces. There's not going to be anybody to fall in love with. Gerard Lucas resisted the urge to run a finger around the collar of his dress uniform to loosen the stifling piece of clothing. What he wouldn't give to be in a flannel shirt and a pair of overalls. Ah, out in the field, wind ruffling his hair, acres of crops flourishing in the sunshine, perhaps a beautiful woman by his side, and... Lieutenant Lucas, are you listening to me? Gerard wrenched his thoughts back to the present and snapped his heels together. Sir, yes, sir. Insulting and then arguing with a higher-ranking officer in front of his men and the local Brits is a serious offense. The only thing keeping you out of the brig or a dishonorable discharge are this war and the fact you didn't take a poke at him. The country needs all the men we can get. Major Albert shook his head. You're a bright guy, one who should be climbing the ranks rather than getting demoted every 3 months. You are lucky Major Quigley only had you reduced to private. Sir, he didn't know what he was talking about. I did not give you permission to speak, and therein lies your problem. Failure to respect the chain of command. You are to obey orders without question and to show respect to those ranked above you. You're arrogant and argumentative. More than a few officers have made that observation. Not a good combination, Lucas. The major dropped into the chair behind his desk. You need to apologize to Major Quigley, in public, at the pub where the incident occurred. Yes, sir. Excellent. Now, the good news for everyone is that you're being transferred to an intelligence unit based out of Washington, D.C. Apparently, your penchant for getting into trouble is a desirable trait for them. Gerard's heart sped up. There had been stories about guerrilla warfare and espionage, but he figured the information was rumor, like most of what he had been hearing in between training exercises. Was he finally going to see the war up close, or rather, behind the scenes? Major Albert tossed him a set of papers, then gestured to the vacant chair. At ease, soldier. Dropping into the seat, Gerard tugged at his collar again and sighed. The material still scratched his skin and threatened to suffocate him. He picked up his orders and scanned the instructions. He had 2 days to prepare, to wait, and to wonder what was in store for him. As you can see, you leave the day after tomorrow. Unless you run into a hitch, you'll report for duty on Saturday. Try not to mess this up. It may be your last chance to remain a free man. Permission to speak candidly, sir? I'd expect nothing less, Lucas. Why me? Why you what? You must have recommended me, sir. Otherwise, how would they know about me? Gerard studied the major. So why did you put my name forward for consideration? Ah, it appears I haven't underestimated your abilities. You're right. I did recommend you. Major Albert smirked. This new department, they're calling it the Office of Strategic Services, a positively bureaucratic label if you ask me. But maybe that's what they want everyone to think. Personally, from the bits and pieces I've been able to glean, it's more like the Department of Dirty Tricks. Anyway, that sounded like something you were suited for. You know, swimming against the tide. I appreciate your faith in me, sir. I won't let you down. It's not me I'm worried about. Don't let yourself down, Lucas. You've got to come to terms with whatever's eating you. Yes, you don't suffer fools, and that's fine. But it's more than that. You're carting around a lot of anger. Maybe you know why, maybe you don't. Either way, you need to channel those feelings or jettison them, because if you don't, you're going to get yourself killed. Understood? Yes, sir. Major Albert steepled his fingers. Quigley wanted to bring you up on charges, put you through a court-martial, but I talked him out of it. Thank you, sir. I'm not looking for gratitude. I'm telling you this because this is your last chance. Not everyone is willing to accept your shenanigans. And despite the roguish nature of your new assignment, there will be some sort of hierarchy. Adhere to it, or you may not survive this war. He rose and extended his hand. Good luck, son, and Godspeed. They shook hands. Gerard put on his peaked wool cap, saluted, then pivoted and hurried from the room, a grin tugging at his lips. Finally, a chance to avenge his brother's death in the Atlantic at the hands of the German submarine Wolfpack. That was chapter 1 in my World War II romance, Spies and Sweethearts. If you're interested in history at all, you might want to visit my website at www.lindashentonmatchett, where my blog tells you lots of tidbits and unknown facts about America's history and Britain's home front as well. Thanks for listening in, and I hope you have a blessed week.